Oh, hi, have a seat. Okay. Preferably over here so they can see you. It's a big room. Should we have the students kind of introduce themselves real quick as we're waiting for the bell?
Great.
So I don't know if you see, wave your hand. Ruben in the front. Ruben's a senior. He's going to try and go into wildlife or
biology, zoology, something like that. Okay. Just trying to find something, but there's not a lot of careers after that. They're usually mostly taken.
Yeah. And you're looking at going to Point, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
How about you? Miss Haig student.
I'm Wiermaa.
Can you hear him okay?
Just barely. Can you repeat it? There's kind of some background noise, I feel like. Maybe it's a hallway or something.
I'm Wiermaa.
Got it that time. And are you all seniors or 9th through 12th, or what grade are you in?
I'm a freshman.
Okay.
I'm a junior.
Can you hear Aiden? No?
Barely.
Okay, want to be a little louder?
I'm Aiden Krasinowski. I'm a junior.
Okay, junior.
Do you want to introduce yourself quick?
I'm Britton Blystone. I'm a sophomore.
Yeah.
Great.
A few of the people that you see here, they're on the the aquaculture team challenge. So Brendan in the orange, he won it last year for his programming and automated monitoring. And
are you guys supposed to be in heads for something?
Yeah, same thing. Have a seat. So, and then this is Aiden. She'll be up here shortly. And he is also competing this year.
Nice. No, that's great to hear. I presented at the Aquaculture Challenge finalist. Olivia, were you there for that presentation? It was similar to this one. I didn't know if any of those students remember.
We were not because
okay.
We actually won it last year, but we were not because of the time change. We came
sure.
At when it was ending. Just
okay.
as we signed on, they said, "Hey, have a nice summer." And we're like, "Oh no."
Well, then it won't be a repeat, so that's good. Because I was worried. I thought, oh, maybe these students have seen this before, but no. Congratulations on the Aquaculture Challenge. That's really impressive. Those are really great systems.
Brendan did a very good job, and his team did an excellent job. So
awesome.
Well, I think we should just get started, and then we'll have some late people rolling in.
Okay. Well, sure. I'd like to give sort of a slightly more formal welcome to you. I'm Junie Carlton, the Education Outreach Specialist for Wisconsin Sea Grant. And in case you're not familiar with Sea Grant, it's a federal-state partnership whose mission is to promote the sustainable use of the Great Lakes resources. And we do that through research, education, and outreach. And I'm really excited to welcome you today to today's Scientist to Student event. The purpose of today's session is to share, not simply inform. So we want you to have an opportunity to ask questions and really be engaged with this event. With that being said, I want to acknowledge we probably will not be able to explore all the aquaculture related topics you may be curious about during the time that's available to us today. Yet we hope that together we can learn a little bit more about the research that's currently being conducted within Wisconsin, and also some of the opportunities that the future may hold. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emma Wiermaa, who's the Aquaculture Outreach Specialist at the Northern Aquaculture Demonstration Facility. And I'm going to just turn off my video in order to save some bandwidth for Emma.
Thanks, Jenny.
Great. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you all for having me today and allowing me to present about the facility. So the Stevens Point Northern Aquaculture Demonstration Facility, it's a big name, so we'll refer to that as NADF for the facility throughout the presentation. Please ask questions if you find anything that's really interesting or you want to learn more about. You can either Your teacher can pop a question in the chat or just, interrupt me between slides. So I want to make this interactive as possible. Normally we do tours up at the facility, and that's a really strong part of our outreach program. So please, if you're interested in any of this, know that we are kind of open door, and you can come up anytime after, the pandemic's done. We really try to get students a lot more engaged in our research and handling fish and sampling fish. So this is probably the least interactive way of outreach that we're doing, but this is the only option right now. But I really encourage you to reach out, after this presentation too, and get involved with what we have to offer for career opportunities and resources in the future. So to start off here, just to introduce a little bit more about myself. So my name is Emma Wiermaa. I've worked for the facility for just over 5 years now as their Aquaculture Outreach and Education Specialist. So that means that I try to do, take the research that's what's happening at the facility and convert it and format it into a way that's useful for people, especially kids K through 12 and career opportunities. We're going to talk quite a bit about that later on in the presentation, but I know one of you mentioned, it's hard to find, a career option in either fish and wildlife or DNR because, jobs can be scarce and they can be quite competitive. Aquaculture is growing exponentially, and there's going to be a lot of career options down the pipeline for this. So I want you to think about that throughout this presentation and think maybe this is something that you want to pursue for a career opportunity and choice. When I went to school, that's all I thought about is DNR, fish and wildlife, because that's what I was told and that's all I knew. And I really wished I would have known more about aquaculture when I was going to school, because now there is degrees in this field and there's a lot of resources out there. I found a great job that I love that is involved with aquaculture, but I wish I would have known it a little sooner to get more of a degree in it. So I went to school for more of an environmental ecology, biology, comprehensive degree because aquaculture wasn't an option at my school. And honestly, I didn't know much about it. So I'm really excited to share with you kind of the options and the opportunities. So this is the picture of kind of the aqua barn at the facility. So we are a northern campus of Stevens Point. We're actually 4 hours north of the facility up in Bayfield, Wisconsin, for those of you that know where that is, way up by the Apostle Islands. And really our mission is to promote public education and also really advance sustainable aquaculture in a number of different ways. And I'll talk about some of our research and how we're doing this. But we're really focused on sustainable means of aquaculture, not only environmentally sustainable, but also economically. So is this something to pursue for an industry? Is it going to be economical? That's also important to think about. And we're also geared for a northern climate. So we're trying to focus on species that people are familiar with in a northern climate, and also what will do well up here. So we're not so much focused on catfish and tilapia and those kind of warm water species. We're looking at things like Atlantic salmon and walleye and Arctic char and trout and systems that also do well up here. And before I say anything more about the facility, it's really important that our team is highlighted. This is really due to the success of the whole program, and why we're internationally recognized is due to the staff. Our directors and our managers have over 30 years of experience outside of a degree of actually raising fish in these different systems. So that's experience that's really hard to find right now. So that's really sought after. And that's really why we're successful as a facility. We are one of a kind in the Midwest, and only a handful in the whole nation that's really like us. So we're a great resource to you as well. So again, please reach out after this presentation if you see anything you're interested in. But just to highlight, this team is really knowledgeable. And we also provide internship opportunities and technician opportunities. So these students here were from Stevens Point. They did a summer internship with us. We also have something called a limited term technician position. And this is a recent success story of ours. This is Marissa, and she came from Lake Superior State University. So we do work with other universities. And she was only with us for about 6 months. She got a lot of experience working with Atlantic salmon and in these recirculating systems that I'll share with you. And she got offered a job with the federal hatchery really because she got this hands-on experience with us. So our job placement is extraordinary. It's close to 100% because our partners and collaborators can see the experience that these students are getting. So again, thinking about this for your future, it's really important to get some hands-on experience. So a quick question just to kind of, hear your opinions here. And now I can see the classroom, so I can ask you directly. When we think about worldwide, you know, seafood and fish consumption, what percentage do you think is actually farmed that we consume? So I want you to raise your hands on which one, but how many of you think 5% of the seafood we eat is farmed? What about 10%? 30? Okay, and 50%. That's pretty good. Actually, the answer is 50%. So you were all closer than I thought you'd be. So over 50% of our seafood that we consume now globally is coming from aquaculture. So someone is actually farming that. And this graph shows you why aquaculture is going to be so important into the future, because when you look at the wild capture fisheries, we're maxed out with how much fish we can capture from the wild. We want to support, you know, the populations of those fisheries. We cannot exploit those populations, and actually it might even decrease because we're looking at other means of raising fish. We're raising them for our protein, and our global, you know, population is increasing. So we have to look to a different source, and that's aquaculture. So when you think about jobs and opportunities, this is going to increase. And they think it's going to increase quite a bit up until 2050 and beyond. So it really makes sense to think about this for kind of a career option and opportunities into the future. Okay, so we're going to start the tour of the facility. So I want this, you know, to be interactive. So please stop me and ask questions if you like. There are videos incorporated with this to kind of show you the different systems and species in the tanks and such. So if they're coming through, if they're hard to come through, just let me know, and we can turn off our videos as well too, but we'll see how they go. This is what I'm going to be using to help explain the facility and to see kind of the big picture of what's all here. And this is called a Scada system. You're looking at a computer screen. And Scada stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. And that's a really fancy term for a monitoring system. So we are trying to monitor as much as we can on the facility grounds. So I'll show you a couple examples. So this is a little clip of this system. And you'll see some number values here. So GPM stands for gallons per minute. So we are tracking things like how much water we are pumping from our wells here. And we're tracking also what's happening inside of our aqua barn when it comes to our recirc system. So we're pumping 224 gallons per minute inside of a recirc system. So if something goes wrong, say a pump goes out or we lose electricity, we will get an alarm, and we're on call 24/7. And it's really important to get here quickly. So we have about 15 minutes before something goes wrong here to get here before we start losing fish. So especially with this kind of technology, it's really important to be on call and to be able to respond to these alarms quickly. Just a quick note, there are a variety of different species used for aquaculture, as you probably know. So any aquatic organism that you're raising in an aquatic environment can be known as aquaculture. So even seaweed can be known as aquaculture. Here at the facility, we're focusing solely on fish species. So that's what we're going to be highlighting today. But even looking at just fish species, you can raise fish for food fish, for bait fish. So those of you that are fishermen or fisherwomen, most of the bait that you buy is somebody actually raised that as an aquaculture source. And conservation species like lake herring, like sturgeon, and we look at all different life stages and a variety of different systems. And what's really important about the facility also is its real life application. We're not just doing research that we think would benefit, we're working directly with our partners. So they're asking questions like, what is the best feed to use with this species? What is the best density we should be raising this fish at? So it's a really strong collaboration with those industry partners.
So Emma, we do have a question. What kind of alarm do you get? Is it a phone call, a text message?
That's a great question. It is a phone call right now. So what happens is different people are on call at different times, so it's not always the same person. Generally, it's our foreman because he lives a block away, so it's helpful. But say he doesn't pick up the phone, it'll go down the line. So it'll call Kendall first, it'll call Greg, it'll call me, and it keeps calling until someone will respond. We want to get it to the point where it's on our smartphones, where we can actually check and see what the alarm is and where it's at. And it's just easier to click respond, and then you kind of already know where it is at the facility, what's happening. But we're getting to that point. So when we talk about technology, I mean, technology is huge for aquaculture right now, but that's a great question. Any other questions at this point?
Not yet.
Okay. So we're going to head into our aqua barn here. This is kind of where the heart of a lot of the research is happening in our research systems. So you can see kind of these major systems here. These are our RAS systems. We call them Ras Systems, or Recirculating Aquaculture Systems. These are reusing up to 99% of the water in there. So again, you see that GPMs. That means that 174 gallons per minute are moving in that system. So we don't have to add much fresh water to these. So you'll see there's these three basic larger systems here. We also have incubation systems where we're incubating eggs, and then larval systems. And we're going to quickly go into each one of these and show you some of the research that's happening. So this is a bell jar system. Just by show of hands, has anybody seen a bell jar before or been to a hatchery that has bell jars? Nope. So a bell jar, a close-up is here. Bell jars are real common for raising species like walleye or lake herring. We've also done sturgeon in these. And what happens is the fresh water comes down this tube here and just gently rolls those eggs and gets them exposed to fresh water and oxygen. For walleye is what you're looking at now. We can fit about 400,000 walleye eggs per jar. So just in our little system here, with 16 jars, we can raise about 8 million walleye fry. So that's a lot of fry to work with, and we're just a research and demonstration facility. So when we're talking about walleye here, if we raise them indoors, it's called intensive rearing. They're raised in these larval tanks like this. And walleye has been sort of a finicky species for a lot of years on how do you raise the species indoors and how do you get it to eat a pelleted feed. We don't want to have to worry about raising this fish on live feed like plankton or feeding it minnows. We really want to get it to eat a commercial pelleted feed. So we've done nearly 10 years of research on really the techniques to do this. And now we've gotten to the point where it's successful and we want to make it commercial. So we want to share all this information that we have out to the industry so they can raise the species here in Wisconsin for food fish. So that's just one example of kind of what this system is being used for currently. This is a little clip of the bell jar system in action. So you'll see I'm going to pause it quick.
I got 2 questions.
Oh, yes.
Is there what's the survival rate for, so say every, how many eggs you have? Is it like way better? I'm sure it's way better than in the wild, but what is it? Is it like really successful?
That's a really good question. It is much better than in the wild, of course. So in the wild, we say somewhere between 1 to 2% actually survive. Because of all the environmental parameters, correct? But it depends on the species. And it depends on how domesticated they are. So a species like walleye that I just talked about, their egg survival can be anywhere from 60 to 90%, and that's due to the fertilization success. So how many of those eggs were actually fertilized and that survive? So it's about 60% there usually is an average for us. And that's because we're working with a wild brood stock also. So we still have to obtain these eggs from the wild, and sometimes the fertilization success isn't as good. And then from that point, usually we get about 60% survival from that fry. So for walleye, we're still trying to figure out some of those kinks. For Atlantic salmon and rainbow trout, it's more like 90% each time because they're domesticated species. They're a little hardier. We really know how to raise them.
One more.
That's a great question.
I know from experience that if you eat something that's pellet fed, that's something that, you know, you caught from a lake, that the one fed pellets is going to taste, you know, not as good. There's going to be, you know, maybe a little bit more fat. So how do you suspect consumers are going to respond to that if it doesn't taste as well, if you're not feeding it minnows and just
right, right. That's a great question also. So it really depends on the feed that you feed the fish. So a lot of our producers and what we produce, the food that we feed the fish is called certified safe. So that any fish meal that was in that feed is certified safe. So whether it be mercuries or PCB, those are certified safe levels in that feed. So that's kind of the health concern is taken care of. But you're talking more about the flavor. And from personal experience, I think a lot of people are eating aquaculture raised fish without even knowing it. Most Atlantic salmon that you buy in the store, if it doesn't say wild caught, it's definitely farm raised. So that's another thing. I think people are eating it without even knowing. And secondly, it really depends on how you raise them. We call it purging. Before the fish is ready for harvest, we purge kind of that off flavor out of them. It's like if you've ever eaten a bass in really warm water in a pond system, it'll have that kind of earthy or muddy off flavor to it. And a lot of people, you know, don't like that flavor, of course. So we physically have to purge those fish, meaning taking them off feed and giving them fresh, clean water. And that purges that kind of off flavor out of them. So it makes them taste better. So when you're talking about taste and flavor, it really depends on the feed that you're feeding them and kind of the ways in which you're raising them and making sure that they're fully purged before they go to market. Because that can really ruin your whole business if you start selling fish that nobody likes or it doesn't taste good. That'll ruin your markets. But that's a great question. There's a lot of factors involved in that, and they're working on, you know, making that fish, that flavor really stand out in a positive way for aquaculture. Does that help?
Yes.
Great. Great questions, guys. Thank you. So moving on with this little clip here, you can see this system in action. We've got these lights set up here, so I'm just going to move back a second. So you notice the eggs become really dark, so they almost look black. That means that they're ready to hatch. They become dark-eyed. And when they hatch, they just swim up that bell jar and they go into this trough back here. And then they go into these designated tanks. And you'll see these lights set up. And when I play this, give it a minute. So the fry, when they first hatch out, they're attracted to light. So all the good, strong swimming fry will be all concentrated near that light source. You can see them here. They're very tiny. They're smaller. If you think of a mosquito larvae, they're smaller than that. And so that's where we would scoop them up and put them through a fry counter, is near that light source. So any of the other fry that aren't near that light will probably not survive and be not as strong swimming. And then you'll just see here, there's kind of a bubble curtain screen here. And this is because if we just had a bottom screen right here, it would get clogged up with leftover eggshells and debris. So we have to create a big box that has a lot of surface area for that water to leave. Otherwise the tank would overflow. So that's kind of just the little tricks to this system. So to see more of a commercial application, so our system is small because it's demonstration. This is Lactus Sambo Tribal Hatchery, and a lot of tribal hatcheries raise walleye. And you can see how many millions of fry that they'd hatch out in these bell jars. So if you ever go to also a DNR hatchery, they'll have many, many rows of these jars. So you can imagine how many millions of fry that they're hatching out. So I mentioned walleye are difficult to raise, and this is one big aspect of why they're so difficult. They can be very cannibalistic. And if you know anything about walleye, is that they're piscivores, meaning they want to eat another fish, and that includes each other. So cannibalism can be a huge issue for raising this species. You can see their mouth gape here and how wide they can open their mouth, meaning that they can consume fish nearly their own size. So there is some techniques to raising walleye, such as using kind of a turbid water. And this is actually, we mix clay with the water. It's a bentonite clay, a very specific clay that doesn't harm their gills. And they cannot see each other as well. So cannibalism really drops when we use this bentonite clay in here. So we really can't see what's in there either until we kind of do some sample counts and scoop them up with a net, as you see here. So what I just showed you was kind of this half of the facility, or the top half, and that's what we call our cool water species, like our walleye, and maybe we'll raise perch or panfish on the cool water side. Now I'm going to show you the difference with cold water species. So cold water would be Atlantic salmon or trout or Arctic char, and this is the type of incubation system that's used to raise those cold water fish. So much different from the bell jar system. They actually are incubated in trays like this. So they don't like to be rolled like the bell jar. They don't like to have a lot of light on them. And basically they just lay in those trays and fresh water will kind of percolate down through them. Here's a little clip of our technicians picking out the dead eggs. So it's really important to clean these every day. So we've got only about 20,000 eggs in each tray, but if one of those eggs got a fungus on it or bacteria, it would transfer to the rest of those eggs. So the white ones are the dead ones, and they're going through and picking those out. So then in comparison, so instead of all those smaller larval tanks with the clay for walleye, for our salmon and our trout, we put them in these kind of insert tanks, which are nice shallow tanks. We can see the fry and collect any mortalities and make sure they're doing okay. You notice these kind of squares here, and all those are little pieces of turf upside down. And what that does is that allows the fry to hide underneath that. So if you think about a cold water fish, they're in a river or a stream and they're hiding in the rocks, and that gives them kind of that security and makes them a lot less stressed. So what's nice about these tanks is that when the fish are old enough or large enough, we call them a small fingerling size, we can take the insert out and then they have access to that entire tank there. Here's just a clip of them first feeding. So these guys are several months old by now and they're just accepting feed. So they're a lot slower growing than the walleye or a cool water fish. So they're just taking their first bites of feed here. And then you can see that those mats there where they're still hiding if they're not ready to feed yet. Just a quick comparison. We've got an Atlantic salmon fry here. You'll notice they've got quite a large yolk sac. That's what this is called. So that provides them feed for a number of days or even months before that they're ready for an external food source, like a commercial feed. So when this fish hatches out, we just leave it in the bell jars and wait for them to absorb this yolk sac after about a month. So we really don't have to feed them for a month after they hatch. Here's another cold water fish called an Arctic char. They're much smaller than Atlantic salmon, but again, they're cold water fish and we really don't have to feed them for about a month. And then this is our walleye. Similar species in size would be something like a panfish, like sunfish, bluegill, yellow perch. They're much smaller, but the difference is because they're a cool water fish, we have them in a little bit warmer water. And this fish is ready to eat in 3 to 5 days. So when our walleye hatch out, we have to be sure to get feed to them quickly because if we don't, you know what happens. They start to get hungry and they'll cannibalize or they'll starve. So, you know, we're talking about fish species, but fish are very different in how you raise them and the systems. And also you really have to have that expertise for the species you're raising. So we're going to move on to our grow out systems. So these are our larger RAS or recirculating aquaculture systems. This system was here about a couple years ago. We're looking at brood stock, Atlantic salmon brood stock. So we're harvesting eggs and milk from those fish. And what was really cool about this project is we were working with a company out in Washington. So we sent these eggs all the way to Washington, and they're creating a new brood stock of this specific strain that did really well in freshwater in these recirc systems. And what's really interesting is if you were an Atlantic salmon farmer and you wanted eggs, you'd have to order them all the way from Iceland. Now with this project, you can order them from this company in Washington. So we've made it so that all US farmers can order Atlantic salmon eggs in the United States. So this was a really cool project. But because we're a research and demonstration facility, we're always changing. So this is a new system now replaced. So this is looking at a project with a type of oxygenation system called the Nano Bubble. And a Nano Bubble is a very teeny tiny micro oxygen bubble. So it's just a way to increase oxygen in this system. So just an idea that, we're always changing. So next year, if I gave this presentation, all these systems might be changed and we're doing something different. So looking at this research system, you'll notice all of the tanks are covered up. And that's because we're raising walleye in this system. So we looked at recent projects was looking at different densities. So how many fish can we raise, in a certain volume of a tank? Some species like schooling fish really like to be highly dense because it makes them feel safe and more secure and they grow faster. A species like walleye, we figured out, both densities have perfect survival. They all survived, but they actually grew faster with this lower density. And that's because walleye aren't really a schooling fish, but we wanted to look at the economics of both of those. So that was a recent project we did, and we'll be publishing those results. This is a little clip to show you that walleye are crepuscular, which means that they are active in the dim hours of the morning and the evening. So you see kind of the glowing lights, just like a deer would be or any other nocturnal species. So that makes them a little more difficult to raise because you have to raise them in the dark. So it's harder to watch them feed. It's harder to, if there's a mortality, it's hard to see that. So again, it makes it a little more difficult, but we figured out an effective way to raise this species. So our last research system here, this is our cold water side. So you'll see the piping is all kind of insulated. That means we're trying to keep this system really cold, nice and cold. So about 50 degrees, because we're looking at raising Atlantic salmon. So instead of the tanks being all covered up, you see there's net on the tanks. And that's because Atlantic salmon are very good jumpers. So we have to make sure that those tanks are completely netted over so we don't get fish flying out of those tanks. So one kind of more of a collaborative project and a networking project is we're working with people all over the nation and even internationally to look at Atlantic salmon. What's the best, how's the best ways to raise them in those research systems? We're looking at strains and genetics, and we're working with a number of different stakeholders here on really how to do this sustainably and successfully. And then kind of out of our Atlantic salmon work has been Superior Fresh. Has anyone heard of Superior Fresh? Nobody? So this is in Wisconsin, this company. This is the world's largest aquaponics facility. So if you go into any Quick Trip in Wisconsin or most grocery stores, you'll find Superior Fresh lettuce and greens. And then their fish is also in quite a few grocery stores in Wisconsin, but they are expanding. So they just doubled their production in size. So you can see how large this greenhouse is. So they're a decoupled aquaponics system, meaning they raise their fish in this barn here, and then they side stream nutrients to that full greenhouse. So at this first stage, they were raising about 16,000 heads of lettuce a day, and now they just doubled it. So we're really excited to work with this company because they're very sustainably minded. They've worked with the DNR throughout the whole time for regulations and making sure that they were being environmentally sustainable. They have a really great business plan. This is Brandon Gottsacker, the president. He was a Point graduate, and now he's president of this company. So we're really excited to work with them on the Atlantic salmon side of things and help do research that's going to benefit them in the future. So just an example of a company right here in Wisconsin. So I don't have time to talk about all the technology behind RAS systems, but I did want to highlight one really important aspect of RAS, or one really important piece of equipment, is our biofilters. So we call them a wetland in a can. So this is raising good bacteria to handle some toxic elements that come from the fish, like ammonia and nitrites. And those of you involved in aquaponics probably know what I'm talking about. But the key to biofilters is providing a lot of surface area, a lot of area for good bacteria to grow on. So this is called a sand biofilter. And what happens is the water enters on the bottom and gets fluidized up through the sand. And in this setup here, it comes up over through a degassing column. So we're degassing CO2 from this system that's coming from the fish. And then it leads into a sump here. So you'll notice there's kind of a lot of bells and whistles on this system, right? So these are all hooked up to an alarm system. So say one of these pumps goes out, we will get an alarm and has to come over here and fix it. And you'll notice you can't see as well, but there's at least two of everything. So there's two pumps on each, wherever the water flow is going. So if this pump happened to go out, we would get an alarm, and this pump would at least keep the fish alive until we got there. So it's really important to have this backup capability. And then this is called a drum filter here. That filters out some suspended solids from the tank. And then I wanted to quickly show you a different type of one of our biofilters we use. This is called a moving bed bioreactor. So again, all we're doing is providing a home for that bacteria to live on. But you'll notice how large a box this is. This has a pretty big footprint compared to that sand biofilter. So there's pros and cons to each of these. But you know, we have them both for demonstration, but we really feel like the sand gives a lot more surface area. It's a little more efficient for raising a lot of fish in our systems. So real quickly here, we've just got a few more systems left. We have two buildings outside that are kind of these farm tech hoop house buildings. This is a partial reuse system. So those big systems I just showed you with a biofilter and a drum filter, and those are very expensive. They're about $100,000 for the systems that I was showing you. That's a lot of money to ask a farmer to convert over to if they want to reuse some water. So we developed this system, and all we're doing is we are sending the water we want to reuse to a sump in the back here. We pump it up, and this is a degassing column. So we're getting rid of that CO2 that the fish are producing. And then it goes back into the tank. So we can reuse about 60% of this water, and we don't have to buy things like that expensive biofilter and the drum filter and have a lot of pumping costs. So we are experimenting with systems like this to show, you know, companies and facilities in Wisconsin, you know, there's an option to reuse at least some of your water without that expense. And then this is kind of the opposite, is called a raceway, where you're not reusing any of your water. Raceways were a very common way of raising fish in Wisconsin. So a lot of older facilities or grandfathered in facilities have these. I don't believe we'll be seeing much in the future because, again, you can't reuse that water and they're a little less efficient. But they're a pretty basic concept and they can still raise fish. So we do have them here as a demonstration. And to show you more of a commercial application, if you go to Idaho or Washington, someplace out west, they have facilities here. This one's called Miracle Springs, where literally the water is pouring out of the mountainside and they're utilizing it to raise golden trout and various other trout species. So you can see the size of this. So they are still, you know, effectively raising a lot of fish with this, but they've got the available water as well too. So just to show you kind of the size and commercial application. So our last system here I wanted to talk about is our pond system. So when we raise fish out in ponds, that's called extensive production. So our ponds are drained every year and are refilled in the spring. So we don't overwinter them. So this pond has just been refilled in the spring, and you'll see Brittany here, she's pouring something into the pond, and that's fertilizer. So when we start our ponds up from scratch, we'll put things like alfalfa meal and phosphorus in that pond because we want a plankton bloom to happen. And I'll show you why in a minute. But the plankton bloom will cause zooplankton to come in, so things like Daphnia and rotifers, and that's what will feed our fish for the first month of their lives. So these are walleye, and that's what the walleye will be feeding on out there for the first month. So this is a little clip of our zooplankton. So things like rotifers, which is the most zooplankton you see in this video. We also have things like copepods here and Daphnia. So it's really important. It's kind of an art to raising fish outside that you really have to make sure that you get a really good plankton bloom for those fish to eat. If you don't, if the weather's bad, if it's snowing in May, which it very well could be, it's really hard to get this plankton bloom. So it can be very challenging to raise fish out in ponds just due to our weather. And then when we want to harvest those fish from our ponds, all we have to do is open up a valve here, and all of the fish and water will drain into a collection kettle here, which is like a big strainer. And then the fish can just be netted out of the kettle here and put onto mainly a truck that's used for hauling fish, and those fish will generally be stocked in other inland Wisconsin lakes and ponds. So we've been raising walleye out in the ponds really since I started, and this is called an extended fingerling walleye. So there was quite a large Wisconsin walleye initiative that happened in the state. So the DNR was paying producers to raise walleye of this size. So it was a big market demand, and there's still a lot of lake associations that will pay a producer to raise a species of this size, a walleye of this size. So this is the final stop to our tour here. This is called our settling pond. So after we're done using all the water, any water we want to get rid of, that's called effluent. So that effluent comes into the settling pond here. There's a pipe underneath this platform. So the water comes in, and most of the fecal material and leftover feed will be here. And then you'll see in the clip, the water just slowly goes across the settling pond. And then behind these ponds are a created wetland. So you'll see a real small sign back here. So this whole area has been created into a wetland to handle any excess phosphorus and nutrients that are coming from the farm. And you'll notice there's two settling ponds here. One is dry and one is in use. So one is always drying out so that we can harvest that debris, that sediment, that fertilizer, and we can land apply it. And it makes really good fertilizer for plants, and so people can come and pick it up, and we can easily get rid of that. But it's really important to have this kind of setup because we can't just dump our water into a stream or a river. We have to clarify it somehow, and this is how we do that. So I know that was a lot of information, so I want to take a quick break here. I just have a few more slides about career options and kind of thoughts for the future, but I want to just take a minute and answer any questions you might have about the tour, or stand up if you need to. But does anybody have any questions for me?
There was a tank that said, "Don't stick your hand in it." Is there something that happened that prompted that?
So that's a good question. We get a lot of kids in. We have open door tours where we have, kids that are 5 years old come through, and a lot of them want to stick their hands in the water because, why wouldn't you? But sometimes, older people want to too. So it's a biosecurity hazard to be putting your hands in this fish tank and then going over and putting your hands in this fish tank. So we have to put those little fun signs up to say, please don't put your hands in the tank.
So this is perhaps a related question. I noticed that you had some of your images that you were wearing gloves while you were holding the fish, and others you're barehanded. Is it the same reason?
So the gloves, it depends on the person. Actually, one of our technicians, he's the best fisherman I've ever met. He loves to fish. He fishes every day, but he's allergic to fish. So he can't touch them with his bare hands because he gets a rash. So that's probably why. As long as, for the fish's sake, you know, as long as your hands are clean and actually have water on them, it's okay for them. So it's more about us, you know, our precautions. If we're handling fish, you know, if we're filleting them or something, we probably wear gloves, but it probably just depends on the person. Or if we're doing some sort of research with them where we're treating them with something, you always probably want to use gloves.
We have about a minute left here and the bell's going to ring. And I think we're going to lose most of our students that have to ride the bus. But do you guys have any last minute burning questions or? Yeah.
It's a lot of money to run this. I know it sounds like a lot of money. And you said, you know, $100,000. What is like the main source of, I would say, revenue from this? Is it the fish, or is it a combination of all things that you get from it?
So it depends on what you're doing, right? But normally you want to raise a high dollar species. So that's why we focus on walleye and Atlantic salmon, because you can get a lot of money for that fish compared to a fish that you're competing with overseas markets with, like tilapia. So that's why, you know, the fish should be your greatest income, right? But if you're doing aquaponics, you know, looking at Superior Fresh, looking at that greenhouse, they might be, actually, I don't know. But you usually are making a profit quicker with those plants because you can get them to market quicker. You know, 6 weeks to market is pretty quick for a plant versus an Atlantic salmon that might take 2 years. So of course, you know, that's a good question. You really have to think about, you know, your species, how much you can get for that species, and is it going to be profitable in that system that, you know, has so much high capital cost.
One more question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you trying, I know that people breed, you know, like mammals, they breed, you know, cows if they want them bigger, if they want to produce more milk. Do you breed fish to make them bigger or, you know, with less fat content or maybe more fat content? Do you breed?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, definitely. So we're a little bit behind, I feel like, when it comes to aquaculture breeding than things like cattle and pigs, and because we've always harvested fish from the wild generally. You know, aquaculture is and fish is, it's kind of like the last, you know, harvesting fish from the wild, that's kind of the last animal that we're harvesting commercially from the wild. We don't do that with pigs and, you know, cows and even deer. You know, it's not a commercial product. So you're very correct in that we are looking at this, but we're a little bit behind. So a species like rainbow trout, we have a lot of years invested in learning more about the species and breeding the species to become bigger. There is things like GMO out there, but we're trying to stay more true to just the basic genetics of the fish itself and just breeding that good growth into it. But that's a great question. They have been very, very wonderful questions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Even the hands in the tank. That was a good one.
Where do the majority of your fish go after they've grown up?
So at our facility, because we're research and demonstration, it depends on the project. So our walleye that we raise out in the ponds, those are a collaboration with the tribe to go into inland lakes in Wisconsin. So those fish are bred for a stocking program. Things like conservation species, we've raised sturgeon with the DNR. So those fish, you know, were a trial to be raised indoors. And then we released them out for conservation work. Some species that are raised for food fish, they go to the food market. So we'll donate those fish to our tribal elderly program and other kind of local programs, food shelves. But we don't do anything commercially with them because we're research and demonstration. So it's not like we would sell our fish to our local market on a continuous basis. And in terms of our local schools, a lot of those fish we raise as a feed trained fingerling, and then we can donate those to schools that are using aquaponics as well. Good question.
There's another one. Have you, is it like, how should I say this? Have you like tried a species of fish and it just hasn't worked? Like, is there any that you like, is it kind of a risky situation for that? Like say one disease just spreads, you know, like something just gets in the water. Is it kind of a a gamble, or is it more controlled?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So first you asked about, is there a species that kind of didn't do as well as we thought it would, or, you know, species like that. We've had a lot of issues with a species called yellow perch that you're probably familiar with, especially raising them indoors, because they're walleye seem to be a lot hardier. They accept the feed, they grow quick. Yellow perch, we've had a lot of issues getting to that next step, accepting that feed, and we've had a lot of issues with not so much disease because it's an indoor environment, but genetic issues, and we've had a lot of mortalities from deformities and things. So yellow perch is a species that we're still trying to figure out. We would like to, because there's a big market for it, but walleye seem to be a lot stronger in that regard, and we are a lot more successful with that species. So that's kind of a comparison there. When it comes to disease and controlling that sort of thing, that's what makes these research systems so appealing, because you don't have access to the external environment unless you brought something in. So when you raise fish in a pond, you know, they can have exposure to a number of different viruses and diseases, but indoors, you know, you're controlling a lot of that, so you can really limit it. That being said, when you raise a lot of fish together in a tank, you know, if one gets sick, it's very easy for it to transfer to the other. So that's why it's really important to keep fish happy and low stress, because the minute you stress fish out, they get sick. Just like we would, you know, if a test is coming up and we're getting really stressed out, it's really easy for our immune systems to drop and get sick. So it's the same with fish. If you handle them a lot, if you're stressing them out, if the water quality is poor, they're going to get sick with something and you're going to see mortalities. So that's different with other animals. I feel like it's a little easier to catch if, you know, a cattle gets sick or a pig or something. You can kind of catch it before it gets too bad. Fish, a lot of times it's risky, and you have to really watch your fish and really know that they're healthy and that they're stress free, I guess.
Here's a weird question. Is it? I'm an animal guy. Okay? I like you know, anything, you know. Watch mice. You know, I really like fish. How would you say the job is? Is it like a new thing every day, or is it like kind of like lab work? You know, like same thing running tests.
So it depends on who you're working for and the facility that you're working at. Some of it could be monotonous. You know, you're a technician work, but you know, a facility like ours too, we're always looking at new species and new systems and that's what I love about my job too, is you get to work with a number of different partners, and every day is different. But some, you know, maybe a producer, maybe you're working with the same species, but you're always problem solving, I feel like, because you're always working with an animal. So you have to really make sure that the water quality is good, and things will happen, you know, risks will happen, and you know, things will happen that you might not be able to control. So I think the problem solving and, you know, figuring out issues is pretty consistent, which makes it sort of exciting, and you're always learning, I feel like, which makes this industry really appealing to me anyways, and probably to you too. Just being able to watch the fish and see the fish and make sure that they're healthy and safe and responding positively to things. Our director always says, you know, you're not going to get in trouble for watching the fish. So we can, you know, we sit there and we watch them to make sure that they're responding to feed, that they're acting normally. Because if you can catch something that's happening, like if all of a sudden they go off feed and they're not feeding, that should put a red flag in your mind to say there's something wrong. You know, is it the water quality? Is there something stressing them out? And that's what's really, really interesting to me anyways, coming from the biology side of things, is just being in tune with fish and figuring out, you know, if there's a problem and figuring out solutions.
No. Oh, how was it called? Recovery efforts, say, say like the paddlefish, you know, paddlefish, right? And
yeah.
Just, would say someone, is there any like something to gain from that or anything, or is it just like kind of a side project, or does the DNR like pay for how many fish? Or, I'm just kind of thinking of if it's more like a kind of like a side hobby, or is it a full-on thing that you could probably go into?
For a conservation species specifically?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what programs they have for the DNR. All the research we've done is, I think it was a collaborative effort. It might have been a research project when we raised sturgeon, and to see if they would do well in an indoor environment for a restocking purpose. But it really just depends. I mean, a hobby versus a business, I guess it depends on the business plan and kind of working with your markets, whether that be the DNR purchasing your fish from you, like the restocking efforts for walleye. So there was a large, that Wisconsin Walleye Initiative where the DNR actually paid, producers to raise walleye because they wanted to have this restocking effort. So it depends on the species, it depends on the year, and probably depends on the organization you're working with. I know for Wisconsin, for business-wise, bait fish is a big business in Wisconsin, and not many people realize that. There's some very successful producers raising bait fish because it's we're strong fishermen and fisherwomen in the state, and that's a commodity to have here. Also, food fish. I mean, that's a growing industry in the state too, and we're hoping that continues to grow, so we don't have to purchase fish from overseas and import our seafood. So we're hoping that'll be a business and hopefully a good business model to increase in our state.
Is it one more question, and I gotta go because my brother is waiting for me.
Well, thank you for all the questions. This is great.
Is there like how do you figure out how do you figure out how big a container for fish would be? Like, say, I know it's definitely going to be bigger if you're using sturgeon, and then if you want to keep the sturgeon for so long, you have to kind of estimate how big it's got to be to keep them happy. Is it like different for each species, or is it?
So it depends. I know what you're saying. It depends on the species for sure, on how much room it requires, just as a general stress sense. I'm not quite sure with sturgeon because we really don't raise sturgeon. I couldn't tell you how big a tank you should raise your sturgeon, but it depends on your market size. So for some species like Atlantic salmon, they require pretty good water flow, and their market size is about 10 pounds. So our tank that we raised our broodstock was about 3,000 gallons. And then you have to think about density. So like how dense, or how many fish do you want to raise in that space? So normally our tanks are, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 gallons for our grow out tanks. But we're talking about, commercial densities and commercial production. If you want to have a hobby system, you'd have to just research on the fish and how big a tank that you should be investing in. But density is important. Like I mentioned before, certain species, they grow better and they're less stressed at lower densities, while species like tilapia actually require a higher density, not only because maybe a schooling aspect, but also if you have less individuals in the tank, they start to create territories and start fighting and things. So it really depends on the species as well.
I think that's all the questions we have.
I did kind of have another one.
Oh, okay.
I know you said that you avoid genetically modified fish or whatever, but how big do you think that could become in the industry?
So there is one in the United States. It's called Aqua Bounty, and they do GMO salmon. And, we were worried about it as a marketing aspect. We didn't think people would respond positively to buying that fish. But, there are GMO products out there that a lot of people already consume and don't even know. I mean, a lot of our vegetables and things are GMO. I'm no expert in GMO, and I have no idea what the side effects would be to continue that. But it's a development of some kind, and we'll just have to see how this company does and maybe into the future. We would like to first just figure out non-GMO species, the species itself. That's what we want to look at, the genetics of Atlantic salmon itself. We don't want to have to worry about, you know, GMOs at this point. I feel like the industry isn't ready yet, but that's just my opinion. So I guess the future will tell.
Well, I want to thank the students, especially those that have chosen to stay a little longer and ask some really wonderful questions. And I hope that this session with our scientists for today was informative, and we are open to following up with you. If you have additional questions, feel free to send them to us via email. Maybe you can just quickly flip to the end so that people can pick up your email address. And we certainly hope that you will consider this as an opportunity for yourself in the future.
Definitely. Yes. Thanks so much for having me. And my email is here too. Your teacher can definitely, you know, pass on my information too in the future. But definitely, I mean, thinking about this in future for career options, I mean, I can't stress enough how I wished I would have known more about it. So please, you know, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions and even further opportunities. And the facility is, you know, after the pandemic, will be open for tours. And so I highly recommend and suggest, if you're ever in our area, to come and see us. And it's very powerful to actually see these systems in person and actually kind of be able to work with the fish a little bit, have more of an experience. But thank you so much. And thanks so much for the questions. I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Emma. Again, it was fantastic, and I wish we had more time.